Everyone's sleeper team this year. Let's talk about the Auburn Tigers. Hugh Freeze entering his third season. You got Jackson Arnold as your quarterback. No more are the days of Peyton Thorne screwing everything up. Jackson Arnold seems to be their guy. He actually brought in a backup quarterback that I think I like as well. Ashton Daniels screams backup quarterback, but solid option to have there, if Jackson Arnold gets banged up. I think the reason why people are really high on Auburn is you get a lot of the same faces back on the offensive line. You have a really good wide receiver room that I think you could argue is the best in the SEC. And defensively, sneakily, DJ Durkin had this team firing at a top 25 level last year in a lot of metrics. It was pretty good. Can he come back and do it again? That's another question. We'll see with the schedule dynamic that they have. You're going to see they got pretty tough stretch, near the beginning of the season. Then they get kind of an easier stretch. This is going to be a really interesting season, and I think everyone understands this is a keystone year for Hugh Freeze because he's not doing great on the recruiting trail. He did not have the first two seasons that I think fans and boosters would have liked him to have. And you got a brand new face at quarterback, a guy that struggled, quite frankly, a lot last year. So fascinating 2025 season coming up for Auburn.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. And obviously they've been making headlines too with Hugh Freeze talking about who's calling plays on what downs and all that stuff. I mean, it's just classic August. College football fans are just chomping at the bit. And anytime they can get a headline and talk about it, keep their sanity before we get into actual games, is that kind of was overblown. But it's just funny nonetheless. But yeah, Auburn's a team they're one of I think a team, especially with their schedule too, that not only can make or break their own season too, but can make or break other teams' seasons too, like with Oklahoma and A&M, Alabama, obviously, Baylor, teams that are competing for playoff spots, right? Not only is Auburn with their expectations to be competing in the SEC and for the playoffs, but also a couple teams that they're on their schedule that could be looking at Auburn as a game that makes or breaks their season. So it'll be really fun, interesting to watch. A lot of good storylines. We'll see if this offense takes a step. And I mean, you brought in Hugh Freeze to fix the offense, to have an offense to recruit well. He's recruited well. It's now about fixing the offense. There's no more scapegoat that is Peyton Thorne, right? So it's all up to Jackson Arnold, and can he live up to that 5-star billing? Can Hugh Freeze, Deshaun Nix get the most out of him, especially with the talent in that wide receiver room?
Yeah, I do think offensively they lose. I mean, dude, how good was Jarquez Hunter, man? How underappreciated was he as a football player? I mean, he was
years
he was underappreciated, man. Just because Auburn's not winning 10 games, he was so good, absolute bell cow, NFL prospect, first team All SEC, stud, 1,200 yards last year. He was sixth among Auburn in career all-purpose yardage. And if you know the history of Auburn football players and running backs, that's pretty nuts.
Wow.
So to say he was a good football player, I think is an understatement. But you still got members of this running back room that I think you still feel pretty good about. Damari Alston, Jeremiah Cobb, Darrell Robinson coming from UConn. He was really solid for them. Kind of an explosive guy for sure. Almost 7 yards a carry, I believe. Yeah, I think it's a solid running back room. It'll be a step back for sure, but it's fine.
Yeah, you might have a little bit more committee than the stranglehold that Hunter had on that room in terms of being a total bell cow. I'd also throw in Omar Mabson and see how that kind of checks out, especially I think once you start getting into October, November, and he could be a guy, a true freshman that's getting there. I think he's starting to pop in camp. It sounds like he's got an SEC ready body, ready to make the most of it. So it'll be interesting to see what Hugh Freeze and staff does to get the most out of this room. You talked about a couple different bodies and different skill sets that they have, hopefully being a good complement to Jackson Arnold on the passing game.
Yeah, and speaking of the passing game, I mean, I alluded to it earlier, but feel free to argue with me in the comments, but I think this is the best wide receiver room in the SEC. I'll hear arguments for a couple teams. In my opinion, I think this is the best one. And I'll tell you why. I think Eric Singleton, phenomenal. I mean, he was the number one rated transfer portal wide receiver in the portal this year for really good reason. He was unbelievable for Georgia Tech. Polished, great hands, tough. So he's definitely a go-to guy. Cam Coleman was a highly rated recruit, 5-star, right up there with that next tier after that Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams. Like, you didn't really hear a lot about Cam Coleman, but that dude was good in a couple games, particularly. I think about the A&M game. He was fantastic. Malcolm Simmons, another highly rated recruited guy. It's true sophomore. Perry Thompson. And then also you got a guy, Horatio Fields from Wake Forest, who, if you guys remember that wide receiver room, like, there were a lot of good players. I mean, Donovan Green, Taylor Morin, and then Horatio Fields was another guy in that Wake Forest room that maybe was underutilized. Like Auburn's coaching staff, you hear Hugh Freeze talk glowingly about Horatio Fields and like how ecstatic they are to bring a guy like him in, especially like when you lose a guy like Keandre Lambert-Smith, who, you're hearing all the training camp buzz about him doing great.
Fantasy football darling.
Fantasy football darling, all right, here in August. But yeah, I think they got two really good transfers. And then all those true freshmen last year produced one last year, and you just expect them to take that step. So I think from a talent perspective and in some ways a production perspective, I think this is and could be the best wide receiver room we see in 2025 in the SEC.
Yeah, the only thing is you do have a couple of injuries. You've got an off the field issue as well with Simmons. Hopefully they can figure that out there, but it's one that needs to be a strength for you this year. If you're going to hit your ceiling, this offense is going to take that step. We expect them to. It has to be with this wide receiver room taking the steps we think they are. I also want to say the Singleton Cam Coleman pairing, I think, is incredible with what they do well and how they can kind of benefit each other. Good luck, man. I mean, I'm looking and I'm thinking around on their schedule, and I'm going through the depth charts of the secondaries, that the teams that they're playing, and like you have to have 2 or 3 like really, really good cover guys in your secondary. Obviously, Georgia and Bama definitely will have that. We'll see what Oklahoma and Baylor and A&M bring to the table, how those Arkansas guys kind of develop as well. So it'll be really interesting to see, like, in some of their like hinge games, right? Games that can, propel them to accomplishing some of their goals, right? Competing for the SEC, like, can those guys just take over and make things really easy on Jackson Arnold? His level of difficulty last year was something that stood out watching Oklahoma, whether it was just lack of scheme and identity and open receivers and offensive line. His level of difficulty should go down, and hopefully his development takes up, his production ticks up as well. Will be due to this wide receiver core, I think.
Other pass catchers, this tight end group, whatever, right? I mean, Rivaldo Fairweather, gone, right? I thought he was really good. I don't know how many people would classify, there's no star tight end really in the SEC that I can think of, last year. But this room will just be what it is, I don't think they were super worried about
Eli
losing
Stowers.
guys.
Sorry.
True. Thank you for picking up my slack there, A&M quarterback legend. But his sister plays volleyball. She's freaking awesome. Kendall
Hell
Stowers.
yeah.
She's a stud. So
Couple
Eli
good
Stowers,
athletes.
shout
there.
out. We'll talk about you in a couple videos here, but yeah, this tight end room is what it is. We'll see. I don't think they're super worried about losing Mike O'Reilly in the portal. We'll see how Preston Howard does coming over there from Maryland. I think they like him. I think they like Brandon Frazier. We'll see. On the offensive line, So I saw you see a lot of rankings. I've been seeing Auburn like being like a potential top 10 offensive line in college football this year. I'm not sure I'm ready to say like, oh, lock their top 10, but CD, like, explain to me the optimism here on the offensive line for 2025.
I think a couple tackle transfers that you bring in, Xavier Chaplin, Mason Murphy. I think you're hoping that they are raising the floor of this, and I also at the same simultaneously that ceiling, but especially that floor of this offensive line that doesn't just fall off from underneath. Last year was a disappointing year. Year before that was a disappointing year on that offensive line. We heard drum beats all throughout camp the last two off seasons that, hey, like, these were potentially like they wanted guys to hit. Like, they were feeling good about the guys they brought in, not only recruited, but also in the portal. And you've got Dylan Wade back. You've got Connor Lew back, Jeremiah Wright, right? So you got a couple guys on the interior bringing some continuity. You hope that you insert plug and play Xavier Chaplin and Mason Murphy. You also have Xavier Miller, right, former JUCO guy, to be more of a swing tackle, hopefully for you. And there's like your continuity. There's your five guys, and that's what makes it all click. Hopefully, also too, like, you're gonna have a better quarterback play. Like, you can't just sit there and blitz. Hopefully Jackson Arnold, he can make decisions quicker. They can scheme things open. Hopefully, help your offensive line a little bit more than you've had in this past couple of years. But it's an important group because you have to keep Arnold healthy because he is like your upside. Now, obviously, Ashton Daniels is a guy that's a very serviceable backup in the SEC. Played a lot of football out there in Stanford, and then there's the young freshman, right, Deuce Knight. But yeah, this offensive line is big for you. I'm skeptical. I'm going to be a wait and see approach here with Chaplin and Murphy and how they really do elevate this offensive line. I think it will get better from last year. To automatically just write in pen that it's going to be a top 10 unit in the country, I think is a little bit premature. If that does hit, if that is the case, you're talking about a really dangerous offense here for Auburn.
Yeah, I mean, assuming no injuries, because to be honest, not loving the depth here. Assuming no injuries, this is definitely a top half group in the SEC. I think for sure. And if that's the case, and they play like a top half group in the SEC and they stay healthy, like you said, make Jackson Arnold's life easy. Make Hugh Freeze's life easy. So I'll say I'm high on this offensive line. It sounds like we're not high on this offensive line. I think I'm just trying to tamper the expectations that, have maybe been placed by, members of the national media. And yeah, I don't want to place those expectations on the offensive line, but it should be better. It should be better in 2025. Defensively, I mentioned it before. Sneaky good defense last year. Sneaky. Top 25 team in yards per play allowed, top 15 team in rushing yards per attempt allowed, top 20 team in completion percentage allowed. I mean, pretty solid squad. Now you lose Jalen McLeod. I thought he was fantastic. But you still got some really solid pieces on this defensive line that I think you like. I don't think it's on the high end as some of these other defensive lines in the SEC, but it's a good group. We'll see a lot of these DJ Durkin, 3-down sets. Good luck, Auburn fans, when he does that and, teams run for like 200 yards on you. But it seemed to work last year pretty well because you also had some pretty solid linebackers. Yeah, I think this front seven's pretty good, and you return most of what you had last year.
Yeah, this defense you've got a lot of guys that were recruited by Hugh Freeze and like his staff. And so like that's what the encouraging part is, that not only are they recruiting guys at a high level, but they're hitting on guys or seem to be. They did go out in the portal adding guys, but I don't know if those guys are really going to be big time difference makers. I think that D line, is where you help maybe a younger but talented secondary. So do you have guys like Keldrick Falk, Amaris Williams, Keon Crawford, guys that can pop? I think Falk is a guy that's established as an all SEC kind of guy, but does Williams and Crawford take another step, right, and be difference makers opposite Falk, help him out? and hopefully create situations where you can have one-on-ones with some tackles. And then in linebackers, Riddick and Robert Woodyard, a couple guys in there. Chris Murray, right, coming over, transfer as well. Wheatland, a couple guys give you some depth, but yeah, it's interesting. It's not one that I'm like super high on, super low on. It's just going to be kind of is what it is. It will be interesting to see. Like, there's a lot of talent, no doubt, with Woodyard and Riddick, with some of the stand-up guys. Do they become like all SEC dudes and like legit alphas, or are they just kind of like continuing to grow in their development in this youth here? And what can DJ Durkin get the most out of these guys? But that's kind of what I'm seeing for the front seven. Not a concerning level of group. It will be interesting to see if they do have depth in terms of like, they don't have a ton of proven depth, but they do have talent in the two deep. So it will be interesting to see if they do have to dig into that, what goes on with that front seven.
Yeah, and then the secondary, people are saying this is going to be a really good secondary, and I think it really could be. I mean, you got really good talent in the secondary, but I mean, you got some youngins coming in the secondary, some youngins, and here's the thing. Yes, like all of these guys have had like meaningful playing time and pretty significant snaps, last year, and you're certainly hoping that they're going to take a bigger jump this year. But if you're one of those guys that believes that, a team that's maybe younger will be better at the end of the season because they'll kind of get more familiarized with the system and the guys they're playing with and whatever. I mean, the back half of your schedule is pretty light, and we'll talk about it more, but those first 7 weeks, your first 6 games, you got 4 very losable games. If your secondary is not up to snuff, and all of a sudden Ben Arbuckle's airing the ball out on you, or Sawyer Robertson's doing his thing where he throws for 400 yards, or all of a sudden, Colin Klein's got you in a blender. I mean, and you start, 2-4 or 3-3, and if it's because of your secondary, I have no doubts that they'll get better, as the season goes on, but it'll be interesting. I think this is a very talented group, though, and if they come out of the box and give Baylor a little punch in the mouth and kind of show them what's up, especially with that group of receivers over there, I'm going to be like, okay, this Auburn team is the real deal. Instead of taking, their win total, we'll talk about it, but, if you really want the over, do you think they're going to win over 7.5 games? Just take them against Baylor at minus 130. Instead of taking them to win over 7.5 games at minus 160, because I think that is going to be a huge key indicator on the outcome of their season, whether they win 7 or 8 games. So if you like Auburn to go over, don't take them minus 160 to win 7.5 game or 8 games. Take them minus 130 to beat Baylor on the road, which I don't know if I would do that, but it's an interesting conversation to be had for sure.
Yeah, I almost wish you know how they're starting to do in some fantasy football in the NFL. It's like mid-season redraft. It's like your team's already done. Let's do it again and see what goes on. Or it's the weekly fantasy stuff. It's almost like I wish I could pick Auburn's over on a win total, like you said, after that Baylor game, because I think that's going to tell us so much about what they can do. And obviously they can get better. You've got a lot of new pieces. I say new pieces that I think will get better over the year. Quarterback, I think is one. Running backs will get more settled in. Your offensive line will get more gelled, obviously, as you go on. And then obviously you talk about that secondary being younger. So you'll see some change there, some plasticity with Auburn. But yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm leaning on the under. Now I'm not going to bet it. And if I felt good about it, I totally would, because it's at plus 132. So it's pretty solid odds there that you'll take with that. But I just worry because I see their schedule, and it's a very manageable schedule. It really is, in terms of what you're getting. You talked about that back half after Georgia, right, which is a tough one, no doubt about that. Coming off a bye, you get Georgia, right, but then you get into mid-October. It's Missouri, at Arkansas, Kentucky, at Vanderbilt, get a bye week, and then Mercer and Alabama to finish off November. Yeah, I'd like Arkansas is probably the best team you're playing in 5-6 week stretch. And yeah, we just talked about we did our Arkansas video as well, and we're on the over for Arkansas. They're a solid team, but as far as the SEC goes, this is what you'll take. You'll take that if you're Auburn, especially when you go back to the days you used to have in the SEC West, when you would be playing all those teams in the SEC West in your crossovers, Georgia every year too. So it's you come a long way. We talked about with conference realignment, some teams would hurt in certain years, some teams it would help. And this is a year where I think it's helping Auburn and what their schedule gives them out. But that first couple weeks, I think it's hard. I have too many teams that I'm feeling better about. Baylor, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Georgia, Arkansas, Alabama, that it just worries me to take 8 wins is a lot. 8 wins is a lot.
Yeah, so, well, let me get, what is your opinion on this secondary? Because, like, I got a question, but I think it would be really good. I think it could be really good.
They're young and talented. That I think that's pretty obvious, right? But it'll be interesting. But the other thing too, so they're young, but they've also played a good amount. Like you've got true sophomores, true juniors, up and down that board,
that played significantly in meaningful games last year.
And it's pretty telling that they didn't go out and get guys like to replace these guys. Like they brought in guys to add to the room, to be pieces, to be depth, to be leaders potentially, but not necessarily guys to come in and compete and push those guys. Like I think it's pretty telling how they feel about that group and how they've recruited there. But it's hard. It's hard relying on a couple 19 and 20-year-old kids in that secondary for you, especially if they're all 19 and 20 years old. But I don't know. I tend to lean on it's a fun group, but you're going to get beat. Like I think you will see that youth and inexperience come out, and if it comes out in the wrong spots in September and early October, that could really come back to bite you in the butt.
Yeah, I guess I'll go into the schedule again and their win total. I'll lean under. Not a bet for me at 7.5, even with like plus money. Like you said, I'll reiterate what you said. A lot of teams that I feel better about, after diving into stuff. And I don't like that a lot of those, toss-up games come early in the season, especially, when a lot of those teams have what I think are pretty good coaching staffs on the offensive side of the football, even though I know Oklahoma's a little bit unproven, with what they have in John Mateer, but Ben Arbuckle's pretty scary, not going to lie. But that stretch you have, like, if you come out of that stretch 3-3, you should go 5-0 your next games. Arkansas on the road's a little bit iffy, but you should go 5-0. And then Alabama at home. I mean, Hugh Freeze getting Alabama at home.
With a month to prepare.
With basically a month to prepare. You got, Mercer and then the bye week, and then Kentucky and Vanderbilt, another 2 bye weeks, but yeah, I think that's really interesting. So I think the ceiling of the schedule for sure, you could see this team go, be 9-2 or 10-1 heading into Alabama. That's possible. That's on the range of outcomes for this team, but it sounds very contradictory, me saying that and then also being like, yeah, but I lean under.
Yeah, it's interesting because you do have, like, I'm thinking like, okay, what's worst case scenario? Like reasonable worst case scenario, right? Like 6-6, right? Like 7 and like 6-6 is probably worst case scenario, and at that point, like, it's, well, I guess maybe 5. I think 6-6 is probably like worst case scenario, and that's crazy. That's not far from your over on the win total at 7.5, and then your upside is legit 10 wins, 10-2. Dare I say 11-2? You beat Alabama, like, so that's what's interesting is like that 50 percentile, which is like your median, whatever. It's going to be 7.5 wins, but the upside is a lot further away than that downside, which is just interesting. But what do you think is a a failure. Like, so obviously we're a little bit on the under. So like 7 wins, right? Like, is that something that keeps Hugh Freeze's job? Is that something that does 8 wins? Like, are you satisfied as an Auburn fan with 8 wins?
I think if you're an Auburn fan, I think you can look at this schedule and be like, we can win 9 games. I think last year, I think Auburn
We
fans
should win 9 games.
Yeah,
Like,
you're
that
like,
should be
wow.
the mentality. I think.
Yeah, it should be the mentality. I think like if the under cash, like if you were 7-5, 6-6, I think that's pretty disappointing. I don't know that Hugh Freeze is fired after that. You never know with Auburn. That's like the one team where like coach could get the can literally at any moment. So uh, if Auburn boosters are like, yeah, we like this other guy, after another 7-5 season, seeing the recruiting classes that Hugh Freeze is bringing in, it's like, okay, we're gonna move off this guy before things get nasty around here, which I would understand. But yeah, that's DEFCON 5. I don't know if we're gonna get there. I actually kind of lean. Of course, I lean to them winning only 7 games, but if they only win 6 games or not make a bowl game, that would be like offensive lineman injuries. You're talking about everything going wrong in those first 7 weeks of the season. Maybe Jackson Arnold gets hurt or he just stinks. Like something would have to happen injury wise, or in those close games, you're just finding ways to lose. I mean, interesting one. Special teams. You got a new special teams coordinator, Chad Lunsford. Alec McPherson is healthy. He'll be back. Like you expect him to be a huge bump to the kicking game because you did not have, great time doing that last year. He had transfer as a punter. I don't think he's great, but who knows? Punters can make big leaps in the offseason, just like any other player. So that'll be interesting in those close games. I think Alex McPherson, having him, I think that's a big deal. Like when you're trying to win close games, if you're able to like bring out that kind of leg. So not having him last year certainly hurt, but I like what they got. On both sides of the ball for the most part. Just can they put it together? Can Hugh Freeze, bring out the secret sauce in the Big Mac that is his offense? And can Jackson Arnold be an above average quarterback? Because in the SEC, you don't have a lot of great quarterbacks in the SEC. So how many quarterbacks in the SEC will Jackson Arnold be better than? It's a question we're going to have to find out this season.